In this video, I will take you through the process of rough sketches through to more refined ideation. When it comes to character design, one of the most valuable steps you can take is creating rough thumbnail sketches. This is the stage where you let your imagination roam freely and explore as many ideas as possible before committing to anything polished. Think of thumbnails as your creative playground, small, quick drawings that capture the essence of a character without worrying about details, perfection, or clean lines. At this point, it's not about making something beautiful, it's about discovering possibilities. As artists, we can sometimes get caught up in trying to make every sketch look perfect right from the start, but the thumbnail phase encourages the complete opposite mindset. It's all about loosening up, letting go of expectations, and giving yourself permission to experiment. When you're relaxed and open, your ideas flow more naturally, and you often stumble upon shapes, personalities, and poses you might never have found if you jump straight into your polished artwork. Thumbnails help you push past your first ideas because those first ideas are usually the most predictable, and instead reach a more interesting, unique concept. This early stage in character design process is also a great space to explore variety. You can challenge yourself to create vastly different silhouettes, proportions, and personalities in just a few strokes. Maybe one sketch leans tall and angular, another short and round, or another has exaggerated, unexpected features that spark a new direction. None of these sketches need to be right, they just need to exist. Every thumbnail is a stepping stone that helps you understand what works, what doesn't, and what excites you the most. Ultimately, rough thumbnail sketches give you a safe, pressure-free environment to dream, explore, and iterate. They're not just warm-ups, they're a crucial part of the design process, and that allows your creativity to breathe. By letting your hand move loosely and your ideas expand freely, you set yourself up for a stronger, more intentional character designs later on. So embrace the messiness, enjoy the spontaneity, and use this phase to discover hidden gems that will shape your final character. As you can see here, I've been quickly sketching with a loose round paintbrush instead of a pencil brush to encourage myself away from fine details. Some artists will use even larger brush sizes and focus more on basic shapes and silhouettes at this stage. So find a brush that suits your preferences and stops you from going into too much detail too fast. Notice how each idea makes you feel. Are your lines becoming more angular or more curved? How might this character hold a weapon? Can you feel any kind of personality coming through the lines that you were making? It's also a great idea to have your mood boards open to keep referencing and pulling ideas from. You can use basic shapes and patterns or anything that stands out as inspiration. You may find that there are things that you looked up in your mood boards that make their way into their thumbnail sketches and make them stronger. Remember, there are no wrong answers at this stage. You can do 5 or 500 thumbnails. Just keep exploring until you have exhausted all of your ideas, you've taken all the inspiration you can from your mood boards, and you've really explored the depth of the character you want to create. What does each individual idea mean to you, and how can you take it further the next time? Keep going until you're happy with what you've got. By looking at my sketches side by side, I can notice the flow of each idea and spot the stronger thumbnails. I want my character to feel dynamic and exciting, but also feminine. So I am looking for these long, curved lines, as I really want there to be a flow to the body that signals strength, but also poise and elegance. From these lines of action, we can see elongated curves and a smooth flow that almost emulates a dancer. These contrast this rough sketch, which is blocky and angular and feels a bit stiff and sturdy instead, more like a fighter that would be more dominant and maybe a little bit bulkier, a bit harder. In this next step of my sketch process, I've decided to focus less on the pose of the character so I can really hone in on the costume exploration. It can be absolutely fine to work on both pose and character designs, but for simplicity's sake, I'll break it down on a static standing pose to show my thought process. By using a simple base of the character, you can then explore the themed elements of the design. The character base should follow your favourite thumbnail's proportions, so if they are shorter, have longer arms or face or body, your sketch base should reflect this. As my assassin princess is human, I have stuck with fairly normal proportions, just exaggerating the length of the legs to maintain that dancer-like quality. Even from looking at your base, you should have some feel to your character. Are they strong, frail, or quirky in their proportions? Make sure to ask these questions before exploring further. This is the stage where your ideas start evolving from tiny loose thumbnails into more recognizable concepts. Still rough, still flexible, but now with a bit more clarity and intention behind each stroke. Think of this phase as the bridge between pure exploration and the early stages of design refinement. As you are sketching, make it a habit to glance back at your mood boards. This is where all your inspiration can be pulled from. You've got all your basic shapes and ideas from these mood boards so far, so here you can really hone in on those details. Here, I've really been looking at the idea of the princess and how I can really mix it into the assassin, rogue, warrior type. So I'm trying to take elements that feel extra princessy, like the headpieces, and maybe turn them into a hood or a cloak like an assassin might wear. I'm really trying to look for those mash-up opportunities, and I'm using my mood board to inspire me all throughout this process. The sketches you're creating here aren't supposed to be clean final drawings. They're still rough, quick, gestural, responsive, but unlike tiny thumbnails, these sketches should have a bit more clarity. You want to establish enough information that you can understand the idea clearly when you revisit it later. Think of this stage as saying, okay, I like this concept, now let me explore it more in a more readable way. This means you're defining major shapes more confidently, giving the pose a little more structure, and clarifying the personality through clothing, facial expression, maybe proportions. You don't need to go into details like buckles, stitching, or textures. At this point, it's time to clarify, not polish. So you can see that I have hinted at where I want my buckles to be, and you can maybe see what is armour and what is leather, but I'm not really fussed about rendering those things out. I'm not spending too much time figuring out how the buckle works. Personally, I find it best here to use a sketch brush, so something that looks and feels a bit more like a pencil to me. This is just a personal preference, and you might have differences, but for me it helps me to roughly sketch, reminds me of drawing by hand. So look for a brush or something that helps you emulate that feeling as well. It doesn't tie you down into the details still, and you can be really rough and ready with it and still understand what is going on in your sketch. One of the strongest tools you have at this stage is exaggeration. When you exaggerate, you're pushing your ideas past the obvious version of itself. If you're designing a strong character, push the width of the chest, the stance, the silhouette. If the character is shy, lean them in awkwardly and shrink their presence. Let their shapes collapse a bit. Don't be afraid to take your concepts to the extreme. I'm trying to push the extremes in my design through mashing up this princess and this rogue character. I'm looking at the poofy sleeves, I'm looking at the really elongated capes, I'm thinking about the bunching of the clothing, and I'm trying to really push this princess vibe to the point where does it break the assassin vibe? I'm really trying to wrestle with those ideas together. How can they merge? How do they fight each other? What is interesting? One of the biggest mistakes an artist can make is falling in love with their first good idea, but great ideas rarely come from the first attempt. This is why variation is crucial. By creating multiple versions of the same character with different outfits and ideas, proportions or themes, maybe one of these is more elegant, more bulky, more playful or mysterious. Try changing the shapes of the head, limbs or torso to see if those changes the effects of the personality. So I'm really trying to find a strong but feminine idea in these sketches. Even if some sketches feel strange or too bold, that's a good thing. The variation helps you to discover unexpected ideas, and ideas you might never have reached if you'd stuck to one single safe idea from the start. Let's think about the shape language of these designs. So I've got these three very different ideas going on. If I'm looking at this first one on the left, I've really tried to exaggerate these puffy princess sleeves that I've seen in my mood board to create this really crazy pointed look and feel, which I've then carried on into the legs and also into the feet. So I'm really focused here on these triangular, angular shapes, which to me feel very roguish, and break up the character. So everything about this character has got a kind of sharp edge to it. This is kind of in contrast to the curvature of her face and the softness of her hair. So hopefully her facial expression would stand out in this example. Here, I've overall gone for something that feels softer. So the shape language here almost feels like draping. I really wanted this veil element to be the main feature of this design. So everything else kind of flows from that and supports it. We have a little bit of a flare coming from the sleeves, and then we mimic the veil on the bottom half. To give a little bit of relief from this flowing fabric, I've kept everything else quite tight onto the legs with minimal shapes, as the rest of the silhouette is being held kind of baggy clothing. This third design, I really loved this headpiece that I found inspiration from in my mood board. It made me think of these kind of theatrical hats, and I thought, as the rogue or the assassin, maybe she could have the veil covering the second part of her face. This design is more slender, more focused on everything being more streamlined and more pinched. So I would say for this example, I love the shape language of the hat, but maybe I don't have as much interest going on the rest of the body in the silhouette. This is all very simple. If I was to block all this in, it wouldn't be as exciting as maybe my first idea would be. But I can still see that I've got some really cool ideas going on that I might like to take forward. Like, for instance, I really like this cuff. I really like how I've tried to explain this cuff on the boot as well. So it's really worth exploring your ideas and really pushing them just to see how many different things you can think of and where it might take you. As I have continued exploring my ideas, I eventually start to hone in on a sketch I particularly like. I will then try and maintain the silhouette of this idea and the shape language, but do a few adjustments and explorations that follow the same train of thought. By this point in my exploration, I had toned down the princessy vibes in terms of headwear or anything too exaggerated, as I was thinking about my rogue and how they would want to maybe fit in and be sneaky and not have anything that could get caught on anything. So I focused more on very slender, very tailored elements that would be princess vibes, but have that royal feel of the padding, the buckles, the line work. And at this point, I'm really trying to show a few different options, but within the same silhouette. So they're not a world apart anymore. They're getting closer and closer to what I want my final idea to be. And it's just tweaking the thought process as I go along. As you can see here as well, I'm really looking at my mood board again. I'm really looking at my reference photos again to try and get a bit more of a taste of reality in my sketches. I am starting to deep down into like some more details at this point. I've kind of come through my rough sketch phase, and I'm now starting to think about what a neater line work option would be. So I'm trying to figure out a little bit more of the details here so that the next step of doing neat line drawing would be a lot easier. I might also use elements from 3D websites from here. For example, with the bow, I wasn't sure how that might look from a certain angle. So I used a bow I found on Sketchfab just to make sure it worked in the 3D space and that it was all looking correct in my sketch. So I don't want it to throw off the whole design later on. As you can see, I continue to tweak the design, trying to incorporate the most interesting textures, shapes, and elements of my mood board even now. Even at this phase where I feel my design is starting to pull together, I will still look back at my inspiration to make sure that things are looking correct and that I haven't strayed too far away from my initial ideas. As you move from rough sketches into the final stages of clean, intentional line work, remember that this entire process is what strengthens both your creativity and your technical skill. Those loose, exploratory sketches give you the freedom to test ideas, push shapes, and discover unexpected solutions, while the refinement phase teaches you how to commit, clarify, and bring your character to life with confidence. By fine-tuning your rough line work to clear line work, you are not just polishing a drawing, you're shaping your artistic voice, sharpening your decision-making, and building a workflow that makes every design anew and stronger than the last. By the end of this process, you really want to be able to clearly see how your design works, how clothing fits together, how the armor would move on your character. Does your shape language support the character that you have? Is their personality shining through? I'm hoping that my rogue is starting to look confident, a little bit regal, very strong, but a little bit whimsical as well, with some flowing hair and a little bit of a dancer, ethereal quality potentially. So all these little details add up to really sing about the character that you're creating. This is also an opportunity to make sure that your proportions are correct. Any final tweaks that need to be made before going into final line work are done. If something looks off at this phase, it will look really, really off at the final phase. Next, you should be able to finalize your line work and move on to color.